Welcome to another episode of the CPGGUYS podcast. Our co-hosts, Sri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage with consumers online, in-store, and everywhere in between. And now, here are Sri and Peter.
Welcome to all our listeners of this episode of the CPGGUYS podcast, where we discuss everything brands, retail, in-store, and of course, Amazon, D2C, and the Omnichannel world, and everything in between. And I want to remind our audience that you can find all our content on cpgguys.com. While you're there, scroll down to podcast, and you can find us on 15 plus platforms, including the Apple platform, where Peter and I really appreciate all the love you've shown us with the ratings and the reviews you've given us. We would appreciate if you'd continue to go to tinyurl.com/Apple CPG podcast and leave us a rating and tell us how you feel about the podcast. Of course, you can also open up Apple Podcasts, find the CPGGUYS, and rate us that way as well. And I also want to remind our users with a big, massive thank you for listening in to all our content. 8 female leaders in the month of October, our featured female leadership month, where Peter and I donated $1 for every download of our podcast, up to $250 per episode, to the Susan G. Coleman Foundation. We couldn't have done it without you downloading the podcast and showing us the love you did. So we want to say a big thank you. In the meanwhile, I've also helped launch brand ZenFuel, a 100% natural supplements brand that helps aid your sleep, energy, better movement, stress and anxiety relief, and male wellness. I'd love for you to check it out at www.zenfuel.com. That's ZenFuel.com, or simply search ZenFuel on Amazon. ZenFuel, where your happiness is our ambition. Peter, as always, to the king of data, the king of insights, the loyalty and CRM captain, and my partner on this journey of the CPGGUYS. Welcome, Peter. How you doing?
Why is this the first time I'm hearing about ZenFuel, Sri? I mean, it's not like you've ever mentioned it before. Sri, you are the Woodward to my Bernstein, the Doc to my Marty, the Laverne to my Shirley. I wouldn't be able to do this without you. Thanks as always for being my partner on this journey.
Thank you, Peter. And today we have a special guest, a guest that I've actually been looking forward to over a month at the time we recorded this episode. Because we're going to move away from simply talking about a brand or a retailer or a P&L, and we're going to dive into the world of insights and analytics. And I'm here to welcome my friend that I met at the Texas A&M Retailing Summit, where I keynoted back in 2017, Professor Venky Shankar. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself, audience, and tell them what you do?
Thank you, Sri. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, the CPGGUYS, for a wonderful show and for inviting me. My name is Venky Shankar, as Sri mentioned, and I am the Coleman Chair Professor of Marketing and Director of Research at the Center for Retailing Studies at the Mays Business School, Texas A&M University. And I have been researching marketing, retailing, and CPG products and brands for the last 25 to 30 years. So I'm delighted to be here talking about all the insights, all the analytics, all the new things that's happening. And thank you for inviting. And I have a special place for all those of you who are listening, because these are tough times. I wanted to stay focused and positive, and I have some research insights which will actually give us more optimism as we go forward.
If you want to see how positive Professor Shankar is, do look at the YouTube video of this episode, where you can see a lovely background with sunshine, palm trees, and calm waves rolling by.
One other thing I should there. You and I, we've got to go to some beach pretty soon.
It's long overdue, Peter.
Yeah.
And one of the things I should mention is Professor Shankar and I share one other common bond, and that is our love for, I said, rap music, because both our daughters are actually musicians and singers, and the Clive Davis School of Music and NYU comes to mind. So that is a unique bond we share, and every now and then we will geek out with each other about all the different genres we get to listen to. So that said, I would love to geek out about music today, but I think we want to come back to the consumer goods and CPG industry. So let's jump right in, Venky. And the first question I have for you is a very simple one, actually. And about your career. Your career was primarily anchored on marketing and research surrounding its applicability to retail. But to the layman listening to this podcast, what does that actually mean? Because we're used to brands, we're used to retailers that resell the product.
Thank you. First of all, whatever you've said so far is music to my ears. So there's a nice way to start the introduction. Let me just unpack my research journey a little bit so that the audience can better understand. I did my PhD in marketing from the Kellogg Graduate School of Management at Northwestern University. And my dissertation was on order of entry advantage in markets. So, first mover, pioneer versus late mover, what is the right order to be and what are some advantages and disadvantages? Since then, I've researched a lot of markets, lots of problems in those markets. So all types of consumer packaged goods, consumer durables, consumer services, business to business services. So since consumer packaged goods constitute a huge chunk of marketing spend, naturally, those were the first set of brands. And we used to have a ton of data. And Sri, you worked with IRI. So we used to salivate on data as academicians and researchers. So we did a lot of research on understanding the strategies, not only the entry strategies, positioning, retail strategies, how to distribution strategies, single channel, multi-channel. And fortunately, I was very lucky because when I started my research, that was when the internet was invented, so to speak. The e-commerce channel started opening up on Amazon, started in 1994. So I was one of the earliest researchers in e-commerce and also tracked the channel progression as we move along. And then when you track the offline retailing, in particular in-store and so on, started working with lots of companies such as Frito-Lay, which you were worked with before in the past, PepsiCo, Coke, service companies like Allstate, and have done so much of projects with them, working with the data, analyzing real problems, working on marketing mix modeling, and trying to find the best answers to what should digitally native brands do now, and how has technology shifted the landscape in CPG goods and retail. And retail and CPG goods makers and marketers, they form a symbiosis of sorts, because they have to collaborate well for their success. And today, when we talk about these two together, they have to be working together all the time. I remember my first project with Frito-Lay was on multi-channel forecasting. So, the different channels that Pepsi had, the grocery channel, the drug channel, the mass merchandising channel, everything. And now you add onto that the online channel and different types of online. You now overlay the social media platforms and channels. You have mobile channel, and all of this is lots of data, a lot of juice to what we do in terms of research. And that actually fuels our analytics, helps us generate insights. And these insights, we're able to disseminate our knowledge, which help both retailers and CPG brands make better decisions and plan their strategies forward. So that's in a nutshell what I do and how I've evolved over a period of time, working at very important problems. Today, I'm focused a lot on what's the impact of COVID, and that's what keeps us really humming throughout our journey.
Thank you for that. Shri, our guests won't know this, but both of my parents have PhDs in economics, and I understand the amount of effort that they put into earning those degrees. So I think with earning that comes a tremendous amount of respect. So let me call you professor, because I think you've earned that.
Oh, thank you.
So let's geek out, because I was getting very excited as you were describing this. Shri and I come from a data and analytics background, so this is just kid in a candy store kind of moment for us. Let's get right to the heart of it. The big thing that Shri and I are always talking about is retail apocalypse. So from your research and this pandemic, We hit the tipping point? Are we close to it? Is it still not quite there? What's your research yielding?
The retail apocalypse has been bandied around for a long time. It's not the first time around, as you know. U.S. is and North America in general are overstored compared to the rest of the world. And anyway, a lot of stores had to close. And we know that department stores were the prime target first for closure. And they were closing in droves. Last year, we had about 9,000 stores close to. This year, it's predicted to be 25,000, right? So we are already in that.
I don't mean to interrupt, but you just quoted a very important number out here, and I want to make sure people heard that. Right. 90,000 distribution outlets just shut down. Did I hear that right?
No, I said 9,000 was last year, stores.
9,000. That's why I wanted to make sure I get it right.
Right. 25,000 is expected by the end of this year.
25,000.
COVID just exacerbated it. So imagine as if you have your stores on a cliff waiting to fall, and what COVID did was a domino effect, like one after the other just started falling, and it was bound to happen. So we knew that malls and department stores, and these are the kinds of business formats or retail formats that needed a lot of rethinking and tinkering, and that's what is happening. COVID has completely exacerbated, accelerated some of the devices, and now it's up to the innovation in this. So we will see more omni-channel, more innovative formats, small store shopping. I have a new paper that will be coming out very soon on technology and retailing, where we see lots of new developments that will be taking place in the next 5 years to 10 years or so. And COVID has also accelerated, Peter, the online shopping. Now, we expect about, I think 1 year ago, the forecast was 100 billion in e-commerce sales was expected to be hit in, closer to 2025. Now you're going to hit it in 2021. And in 2025, we may be hitting 435 billion in e-commerce. So that's where we are in terms of acceleration of not only e-commerce, but omni-channel. That is, shop anywhere, anytime, everywhere. And we as me as a marketer or a retailer will be able to touch you everywhere. It's 360-degree seamless shopping.
Listening to the numbers you just stated, there are two things that kind of go to top of mind for me. One was, 25,000 distribution outlet ecosystem shutting down in 2020, unfortunately, due to the pandemic kind of exponentially growing that, as well as the other one is the $400 billion forecast number for 2025. And yes. To me, if I put both of those into the mix, it feels some days like e-commerce has grown 10 years in 1 year against what it normally would have. Does it feel right to say we're somewhere in that zone?
In fact, I would go further than that. One of the McKinsey reports says that people's shift to online has happened what they expected to happen 10 years has happened in a space of, shall we say, 3 weeks. So that's 3 the amount.
Weeks.
Yes. And there's a lot of these things, not just in online groceries and online shopping, but everything online, entertainment moving online, teaching moving online, right? Employment, people work from home online. 250 million people are working online all over the world now. And this has happened in another 3 months, most of it coming from China. So COVID-19 or the pandemic has accelerated the shift to doing everything online dramatically fast.
These are obviously whopping numbers, but also scary numbers for large brands, ones that I have represented in the past, especially making the digital transition over. So I want to jump to the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and that gorilla in the room is Amazon. And clearly Amazon, at the time we recorded this, Prime Day was the last 48 hours and another gangbuster Prime Day, despite the holiday season just being like a month away at that point. But, Amazon is clearly taking a lot of consumption of oxygen in the room and a majority of retail transition in 2020. But if I go back in history, why have brands been so hesitant to embrace Amazon in the first place? To me, it always felt like a no-brainer. And then given what's happened now, the growth of e-com, how do you advise them? Like, what's your big advice for them?
For the big brands, consumer brands, Amazon. See, Amazon has been a trendsetter ever since they started retail e-commerce, right? Amazon is single-handedly disrupted retailing. If you look at many of the apocalypse is also somewhat related to Amazon's growth. And Amazon's biggest impact during this COVID-19 is the fact that they have now made it mandatory for any retailer and any consumer packaged goods maker or any apparel maker, durables maker, to be thinking very, very consciously about online distribution, right? That is either distributing through their own platforms, through Shopify, through Amazon, and so on. And Amazon is growing phenomenally. As you know, it's got 850,000 employees. Now you're looking at, they're trying to expand by 100,000. The holiday, as you rightly mentioned, it is redefining holiday shopping. No, it's not just a Prime Day sale, Sri. It is actually the holiday shopping has been accelerated. So much so that this year, particularly the holiday is going to be very, very different, because gone are those days when which you need to have, you're looking at a Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and a Cyber Sunday. Now that period is extended to close to 8 weeks now. And what it means is that more and more brands have to be present in all channels, and all, not only to create the eyeballs and impressions on people, but to be available and accessible to everyone, right? So in other words, if you decide tomorrow that you want to buy your iPhone 12, right? And you want to be able to buy it in, very quickly. You don't want to be waiting till it is available. Of course, if there's supply issues, that's fine, but you will go to the channel that's offering that. So Amazon is a must for a lot of brands if they can afford it. When I say afford it, meaning there's also the channel conflict they have to resolve, right? So if they're selling through other channels, you have pricing integrity and all those issues. But what is important is Amazon itself is growing as a business. It started out as a e-commerce player, retailer. Now, most of Amazon's profits are coming not from this. It's coming from AWS, of course. It's coming from a growth in advertising platform. It's coming from a growth in the third marketplace, that's where 58% of Amazon's sales are coming from third party. So that's marketplace. So when you sell your products there in Amazon, that is a very important source of sales for Amazon. I mean, combined, collectively. So brands that can afford to be in Amazon, they can be in Amazon, but brands that can be standalone or exclusive brands, and they want to really curtail the distribution and make it exclusive, they probably will not go to Amazon. But by and large, Amazon, Walmart, Target have started becoming bigger and bigger, especially after the pandemic. And if you want a real reach and audience and presence, you have to consider them seriously.
Before we go to the next question with Peter, just on the Amazon theme, not being on Amazon, irrespective of the investments required, is that even an option in 2020 for a large brand?
Yes, when you say large brand, we are talking about the size of the brand. I'll take 1 billion brands, right? So many of these big consumer CPG companies like Coke, Pepsi, Kraft, Mondelez, all of them have lots of 1 billion brands. And for them, many of them, especially their food items and products, they don't have to distribute through Amazon necessarily, right? Because Amazon is still predicated on shipping because their physical stores are not caught up. So if people want immediate gratification, they want to go to the stores and buy a cookie or a soft drink, they still have to go through the regular distribution channels. But if you have something like vitamin that or a energy drink that you're selling, that could easily be solved through Amazon, because people can afford to wait, and there's shelf life, longer shelf life, and so on. So it depends on what the product is. So if you're selling diapers, for example, Amazon has become a huge player. And the other thing, Sri, you have to weigh against, if you're a big brand, is Amazon's private label, right? Amazon's private label has become huge now, beyond belief. Did you know that the largest battery brand is Amazon Basics?
Yeah.
It's more than Energizer. It's more than Duracell, right? So you can imagine what you're up against.
It's hard for the mind to conceive that, but yeah.
Right. So I think that, again, depending on the factors at play, you would selectively choose Amazon to compete. But there's Walmart. Walmart is catching up in a very, very big way. So, you can't ignore Walmart altogether. So Walmart is a huge player now.
It's funny you mentioned Walmart in this, Professor, because first of all, I don't drink coffee. I do drink energy drinks. And I bought all my energy drinks from Amazon until their Prime delivery service faltered during the pandemic, defaulted from 2 days to more like 7 or 8 days. And then I switched to Walmart. And in fact,
there you go.
We mentioned Prime days. I spent the majority of my baskets during the 2-day event, surprisingly, at Walmart for the first time in my life. So a very different thing. I'll also say with respect to the brands, yeah, you may think that perishable is not necessarily Amazon placement required, but now that Amazon has bundled fresh into their Prime model and the pandemic has driven the demand for e-commerce, I all of a sudden see in my world where I'm dealing with product ratings and reviews, which are a core component of the path to purchase, they're all scrambling to figure out how to enhance their content on Amazon Fresh in particular. So I think that's I think that's been true pre-pandemic. I think you'll start to see things that are a little bit different. Let me shift back to shopper analytics and insights. That's where Shri and I cut our teeth in the business at IRI years ago, and where we still have a passion, particularly as we start seeing 1P data and how that affects a brand's ability to grow their business. Let's think about this both from a long and short-term perspective. On an analytics basis, when you think about e-commerce, is it really just about the here and now, or how do you start to think more longitudinally about building up analytic capabilities, and where do you place your bets so that your brand is positioned for success by leveraging all of these consumer insights and analytics that are available to you?
Excellent question. We were talking about the path to purchase. I have a book called Shopper Marketing, which I published a few years ago, and I'm updating it. And now that the path to purchase is really altered by digital. The digital has reshaped the journey for any kind of products or services. In the past, your typical path to purchase for a consumer packaged goods was, there's this funnel model where, consumers used to be aware and consider the product consideration. Then they'll have a choice among a set of narrow brands, finalized brands, and then they'll pick one brand with that. But those model is being redefined by digital in a major way. Because why? If you're looking at millennials and Gen Zs, which are the two largest segments combined together, the US population, now Gen X and baby boomers themselves are not big enough now. And so if you look at their journey, the path to purchase, I call them the shopping journey. And the shopping journey is all starting with the mobile device now. So 82% of all shopping considerations start with mobile. So if you are not present in mobile without an app or without being visible in multitude of apps, then you start with a disadvantage. Then today's consumer wants to use all kinds of devices, wearable smartwatch, smartphone, a tablet, a smart speaker, everything around them. So how do you really be present in all these journey? And what the pandemic has done is, because as you rightly observed, Peter, that you wanted to order your brands and you could not get them in time. So what has happened is many people's brand loyalty has become very fragile. And that's not very good news for CPG brands, right? Research shows that 50% of the people at least have shifted their brands, and a significant majority of them, maybe 2/3, are not going back to their old brands. So what it means is that if you're not in the digital path very strong enough, then you are at a disadvantage as a And what is this digital path? It's not just in the mobile devices and all kinds of devices, but also in the social media platforms. Now we have like so many social media platforms. Previously used to have Facebook mainly, and then Instagram came. Then we have Pinterest, we have Snapchat, we have YouTube video. Now you have TikTok. All of these, if you're not there, each one of them appeals to different demographics at different points in time. So you have to be present all over there. So, and you have to create a demand for these kinds of brands. And what it means is that analytics now starts not in those old days. We used to look at scanner panel data, the individual panel data and the store level scanner data, and then you used to start peel the onions and then see what's my marketing mix doing, what's my price doing here, what's my promotion doing here, because that was the world, that sandbox that we played in. But now today's sandbox is different. We have to start analyzing all the social media. We need to have a war room, social media. We have to listen in. I teach digital marketing. This is what I'm teaching all my graduates who will go on and join these CPG good companies plus Amazon and so on. And they are doing exactly these things, right? Listening to all these social media proactively, having influencers now, which were not not even people who think of celebrity endorsements, but now it's all influencers. They are micro influencers, people who have a very small following, very deep following, and if you don't touch them with your product, if they're relevant, then you as a CPG brand may not be in the reckoning anymore. And then you have to come up with innovative ways in which you're not plugging in your brand, but your brand comes in very naturally in the conversation. So what it means is that you have to be present in advocacy channels. And all of these things have really changed the ball game, so to speak, right? So we are now, CPG good makers are playing a different game. They're competing with digitally native brands. These digitally native brands do not have the baggage that the physical CPG goods makers have. They don't have to go through their channels anymore. And look at Amazon. You can add Amazon Go stores, Amazon Fresh stores, as and when they feel like. And they can put the products on display, make it an experience store, and still have you fulfill your requirements through the shipping mode. So all these things, I'm saying, it's a wake-up call for CPG. One good thing that the pandemic has done for CPG is that their demand has soared because people needed to consume all these things. And we needed to stock up on not just toilet tissues and disinfectants, but also on lots of pantry items, lots of this. But once that demand gets over, now we have to wake up. CPG brands have to wake up and start playing in this new game, right? And that's where I feel much of the action is going to be in the future.
Hey, Shri, let me unpack a couple things here. I was looking at our own data while the professor was describing the mobile-first reality that we're faced with. 81% of our downloads are on mobile devices. I think the other 19 are your mother and my mother, and maybe a couple of other older relatives.
My mom may be 80 years old, but Peter, you should know, she WhatsApp my children, FaceTimes my children. She has 2 Facebook accounts divided by the audience that she likes to discuss and socially engage. And she entered the world of TikTok.
Okay, wow. So I won't say my mom's on TikTok, and I was being a bit facetious. I will tell you this. My mother, on the day it was released, bought the very first IBM 8086 dual boot floppy and has been on the bleeding edge of technology ever since. So I was being a bit facetious there. Second of all, I heard scanner panel. Does that bring me
oh my gosh.
back to
that's
the
Peter
data?
and my first job.
The last thing I'll say is he talked a lot about brand and advocacy. That's my wheelhouse, right? I'm in the rating and review business, and we also have a panel at Power Reviews, a panel of 1 million plus everyday influencers, to your point, that in exchange for just a sample, they will write product reviews. And it's amazing how much more consumers are willing to trust people they've never met and their opinion on a product than they will what the brand itself says about their product or the retailer. It is quite remarkable how much trust and authenticity in product advocacy accelerates the path to purchase. So thank you, Professor. That's just really reassuring information for certainly the mission that Shri and I are on in trying to advocate for how omni-channel and digital influence can accelerate.
One other thing, Peter, I'd like to kind of re-emphasize that Professor Shankar just said over here, which is he used a term that's very profound, and the term is a wake-up call. So guys and gals in our industry, retail or CPG brands, this is your moment to pay attention and take the wake-up call seriously. And the reason you need to do that is pretty straightforward. The industry needs you to be as responsible stewards leading the evolution of consumer goods. Step up your journey in digital transformation and embrace the unprecedented change in the shopper path to purchase. You refer to Professor getting into the micro influences of the micro moments, where even though they might not have 1 million followers, their engagement percentages are significantly higher because you said the word deep. One of the things I've felt over the last 10 years is large brands struggle with things of that nature because they always look for very large outcomes, and the digital world has kind of turned that topsy-turvy. But I want to jump back into your world in the university and what you do every day within the university. You've mentioned already a couple of samples of the type of work you do with brands, but I'd love for you to decompose for us. What are the typical type of brands you work with? Who are the typical retailers you work with? And give us the example of a couple of projects and who the ultimate beneficiary is. Is it always like a CMO or a brand marketer?
It's an excellent question, Sri. I do a portfolio of projects. So for example, let me give you a smattering of some of them, right? With the retailers, at the center, we have a lot of retailers as members of the center. And Sri, you were a keynote speaker, you knew who we were. We have Walmart, we have Macy's, we have GameStop, we have, you know, a lot of different types of retailers across the board, right? And what we do is we take some problems that are very serious interests and consequence to them and start you know, taking the data from them and also collect our own data and then do the analytics and then address and solve those questions. For CPG brands, as I said, we've worked with, you know, the soft beverage companies. And we also work a lot with service brands, right? With services, like I've worked with Marriott a lot. And I've also worked a lot with, you know, durable companies, medical equipment makers, pharmaceutical companies. All of them have similar issues, you know, about understanding shopper better, understanding the path to purchase, the shopping journey, particularly, where are the thoughts of them. I also have some research that is directed at CMO and CEO level. For example, what is the influence of chief marketing officer? One of the recent papers I have also, what's the influence of marketing experience of a CEO on a firm's market value? So we actually go out and collect financial data over a period of time and then show what the CEO's marketing experience matters and how it particularly adds to the market capitalization of the company, of the brands. And so those are all very at high levels, and really at the micro level, we start digging deep into the data, the problem that needs to be solved, and do a number of projects around it. Now, you mentioned that you came from an analytic world where the scanner panel data. Now, what data we have is we have an abundance of data. We have the big data. We get you know, a lot of text data, video data. We have numeric data, all kinds of data we should be good in analyzing, and not in huge volumes. So what it means is that we have to handle the velocity, the 5 V's of it, what we call volume, velocity, variety, different types, and then veracity, that's the integrity of truth, and then finally the value of the data. So we are able to bring in new methods. We have to borrow from computer science. For example, we use a lot of machine learning models, artificial intelligence systems we develop to predict, analyze. And those are becoming now the next important decision areas for CPG marketers now. It's not enough for you to simply have a huge advertising budget and then say, hey, I don't know which half of my advertising gets really effective. It's just not, I don't care so long as I spend a ton of money and throw it on TV and mass media. It's all changed dramatically. So our capabilities, our research capabilities, analytic capabilities are also changing. And what it means for us is that I have to keep myself updated and sharp every day. I learn from everyone. I learn from the latest paper in computer science journal, right? Because there's a new method out there that'll help me parse all those reviews, Peter, you talked about, right? You're getting 10,000 reviews. Now we do what is known as NLP, natural language processing methods, newer and newer methods. We can extract that. We can tell, how brands are doing, and we can even forecast the sales of brands based on these things. So these are becoming the next generation kind of challenges, but we have to start planning for them now. And if you don't have the skill set, and if you're not doing it now, we'll probably, that's why I said it's a wake-up call, because the CPG typical job and skill set used to be very different. Now it's all changing dramatically, and we have to adjust to that if we want to be continuously on top of the market.
Professor, I'm ready to go down about 12 rabbit holes.
Go ahead.
This is all just wonderful, because Shri knows I get excited about this stuff. There was a time when you talk about big data. I used to work for dunnhumby, which obviously had a partnership with Kroger for many years.
Right.
I would go to conferences. I remember the old days when people would whisper in hushed tones, "Oh, that person's from dunnhumby. The black box, it's so big." Now everybody can process data. So it's very, very fascinating. I think when you talk about natural language processing, you're talking for lack of a better term, my language. We do that now. We actually help brands where we can scrape data from retailers like Amazon or Chewy or whatever, run it through our NLP, and actually objectively benchmark a brand against another brand based upon the ratings and reviews that they have. So being able to score a brand based upon its volume, its average star rating, its recency, its the length of reviews, and the overall shopper sentiment than natural language processing tells us. So yeah, we've come a long way. We really have come a tremendous long way. So thank you for all of that. When I think about these brands now, they have so many more resources, to your point, at their disposal. Thinking about how they invest against the digital transformation going on and how digitally influenced sales are, what are your advice for brands and retailers that really need to up their game in these capabilities? What are the things that they specifically should be doing?
That's a great question. I think first and foremost, at the C level, there has to be a mindset change. So recently I was involved in a program with at a very high level with a very large insurance provider, where the CEO invited me to speak to the board and the C-level officers and suite, and said, lay out what analytics can do and how we need to be changing. So I was tasked with a very difficult exercise, because I'm going up against people who are really very smart people who are very entrenched. Fortunately, I was able to go prepared and make an impact, so much so that the organization decided to completely, throughout its employees, about 50,000 or so, to really completely go top down and make it completely analytically driven. So that means, what you have to do is we have to really make people take off all their blinders and, their baggages, and then start to be prepared to reinvent themselves. And I think that's where it starts, the capabilities. And once you do that, you start then investing in it. Now, the key thing to notice, a lot of people think that, analytics means, I'm not an analytics person. I'm a high level person. I'm very intuitive and I don't make all these things. But what they don't understand, I cannot learn this overnight. I can't do this overnight. What is important to understand at a high level is that you just need to understand where analytics plays a role and how it plays a role. If you understand three components of analytics, right, which is descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive, right? So all the analysis that we do are based on past data. We call it descriptive. And then Predictive is how do I use all those models to predict the future. So if I'm predicting sales or new consumer behavior, then prescriptive is what kind of decisions should I be making? And so I start with that kind of a framework, and then people think that, okay, this is easy to understand now. Why is it that analytics is so intimidating for us? It's not. And then you have a layer of people around you, surrounded by very smart, capable people, drawn from different fields, different capabilities, which then put together, they uplift the digital journey, the analytic capabilities of the organization. So I think that's the way to go about. And unfortunately, a lot of companies are very insular and insecure about it. And so they are not able to make that transition. But once they commit to it, they learn that it's not that difficult once you understand how these things work. And that's the journey that it has to start right at the top. And I believe that once you make that commitment and discovery, the rest is really, you can do it at warp speed if you're committed to it.
So Professor, insular and insecure, we talked about how the 800-pound gorilla in the room was Amazon. Let's jump to the other gorilla in the room that has led retail for over multiple decades at this stage, and that is Walmart. In 2020, under Janie Whiteside, they have been racing in digital transformation from a consumer perspective, with the recent release of Walmart Plus and 11% household population within a first few months of starting it up already. As you look at what's going on with Walmart and the digital transformation journey from a consumer perspective, what's your outlook if you've been studying it, and do you feel they're on the right path, and there's a much more that's going to get unpacked in the future over here?
Great question, Sri. I think you're right. Walmart is trying to make up for lost ground. Walmart was an 800-pound gorilla all along in retailing, and unfortunately, they were a bit slow. They didn't take Amazon threat very seriously, and so they were very slow in even getting their online .com site together. But once they invested in it, they started powering it, and then after they acquired Jet.com, then that actually fueled a lot of increase in digital activities. But now Walmart is so focused on digital transformation, so much so that some of the things they are doing is absolutely spot on, right? You mentioned Walmart Plus, is that they're also, redesigning their stores to match with the app layout, which itself shows that now you have to think like a digital customer, which is the millennials and the Gen Zs. And they are primarily looking at a store in their mobile device. They're not really going to the physical store and then looking for layout. That's one thing. And Walmart is also very actively involved, as you know, in the TikTok talks. They could be a co-owner of TikTok. And that primary initiative is to preempt, again, other retailers, even pure play retailers like Amazon, to actually be getting to the generational interest, which is short video based and conversational very quickly, which is going to be the future, right? In the future, people are going to be just, even if you take all the innovations that might come from the merging of computer science driven AI and the neuroscience AI, right? Neuroscience AI, which might lead to more augmented capabilities, right? If you think about it, people could actually think about a product and then it'll self-order. We could be in that situation. So how do you influence that? How do you make sure that you're in people's thoughts, not even in conversations? That's where we need to be thinking. And all these initiatives of Walmart suggest that they are taking this seriously. Of course, they have a huge infrastructure. They cannot just move that easily because they have 11,500 stores, 2.2 million employees all over the world, 27 countries. All these are very, very big infrastructure they cannot simply abandon, right? Unlike Amazon, which could start from the basic ground up, and now they can plot where they want to have a store, what type of store, whether it is a pop-up store or whether it's a large enough store. All these decisions are not easy for Walmart, but with their infrastructure, they're moving fast enough to be more digital and more closer to the future consumer.
Sri, before I forget, we need to put a poll on our LinkedIn page. Should the CPG guys have a TikTok account? I'm not kidding. I think we really need to do that. Professor, I love how you talked about digitally influenced and mobile and the crossover with store. Retailers that don't understand that think about e-commerce and physical as two entirely separate channels, they're not.
Absolutely.
I've told a story on this podcast in the past about me going to a physical store to pick up a healthcare product, opening up the retailer's app, not finding any ratings and reviews, and doing what 70% of people do when they're in a physical store, opening up their Amazon app, finding they had ratings and reviews, finding a product that wasn't on the shelf that was on Amazon that had better products, better ratings and reviews, and then buying it while I'm in the physical store. Beware, retailers. This is coming, and it's coming very fast. I am not an exception when I tell this story. So let's talk a little bit about retail digital transformation, because this is very important. Retailers are notorious for not investing much against digital transformation. What's my proof? Instacart. Why is Instacart so successful? Because they walked into a whole bunch of retailers and said, you don't have to put any capital. Just send me your store level inventory. I got you covered. And they took the grocery industry by storm. So unlike brands, they're usually fairly thin in terms that how do you start to talk to retailers about their need to shake themselves of this legacy behavior and mindset and start thinking about investing in digital transformation? And yes, it's going to reach your P&L.
Absolutely. But fortunately, Peter, one good thing that COVID pandemic has done is accelerated the retailers' transformation, because all of a sudden, for example, you look at grocery retailers. Grocery was the last bastion of e-commerce, so to speak. And all of them had to really scramble themselves to do home delivery and curbside pickup. All of these initiatives, of course, they did a patchwork, right? They always they didn't invest in themselves, like as you said, Instacart was one of the bigger examples, but they were always going in for these smaller players and smaller solutions. And so that has taught them a lesson that digital is not a choice anymore. So you have to do it quicker the better. Now the question is, a lot of them are closing stores and financially they're bleeding. So their P&Ls are not looking good. And that's when they can't invest a lot in the digital technologies. So for now, they could be outsourcing. So that's why the Instacarts of the world, there's a lot of these firms like Shopify's, it's a Canadian company, so you should feel good, eh? If the success of Shopify is showing that, now we can get an outsourced solution. So they can start with that for the e-commerce part. But what is interesting is digital transformation is not just e-commerce. That's the fallacy that a lot of retailers think.
Great.
Digital really starts from the consumer, not in your retail. So the consumer is thinking digitally. That means digital devices, digital touch points, digital interfaces, digital conversations, right? All of the above. So, and that's where I think that thinking has to start. So how do I play in that sandbox, right? So in your digital investment, retailers have to be thinking about, how do I plug myself in that conversation? How do I come there naturally? How do I make sure I'm in the social conversations, right? I think that's why retailers have not traditionally think about how, a lot of retailers don't even have a mobile app, as you rightly said, right? They're like waking up and say, wait a minute, do I need to have we did a research project with a large, we can name the retailer for confidentiality, with a large retailer. And we showed that the moment you launch a lab at the adoption, your sales revenues go into high, anywhere between high single-digit percentage growth to mid tens. So you can get up to 15 to 20% growth in top line, and it also simplifies your expenses. All these means that retailers will have to be really schooled in digital thinking. Now, one of the things that I do with a lot of companies is that, since it's very difficult for them to understand, I actually bring a lot of their kids and grandkids and then let them see how they actually behave. And it's remarkable once they start seeing how these people are. And then I tell them that, you know, these are going to be your future shoppers. These are going to be a future target audience if they're not already, right? And do you think that you're relevant to them right now? And, you know, then I think people start sitting up and then start saying, maybe you're right, you've got a point, right? So I think that's where retailers have to be. And some of these are not very high cost. So digital means a lot of people think that I have to digitally enable my physical storefronts and supply chain and so on, which is important, but that's not where the digital stops. The digital starts with the consumer and then never ends because it comes back. It's a feedback loop. You know, you go back all the way to supply chain and then you again enable them and you come back and you keep doing this over and over again. And sometimes, you know, one of the smart ways for retailers think about in this pandemic is that if you have to close some big stores and they are in prime real estate, you might as well close them, take the money out, and then invest them digitally, right? So that is also another possibility, ways of doing this, because you're anyway overstored and you may not need all the stores. And then you may want to translate that in that way, if you're really hurting. I mean, we are talking about mainly CPG, but I also work a lot with durables, like apparel companies are really hurting, apparel retailers the most. You know, you see Gap's closing lots of stores, and you see lots of these going into bankruptcy, starting from JCPenney's, Forever 21, you know, Brooks Brothers, Men's Warehouse. Men's Warehouse, you know, just came out with a store where it's all touchless, but it's a bit too little too late, right? But you know, in the sense, you should have been anticipating this for a long time, but the pandemic has accelerated that. So you're absolutely right. Thinking digitally for a retailer has to start from the consumer, not necessarily in terms of what's a line item in my P&L and how much do I have to invest in technology, but it's just the mindset.
Sri, what I hear from the professor is that one of the top 3 grocery retailers in the country has a CEO with no children and no grandchildren. Will that retailer be at a disadvantage? I know this person personally, and I know this for a fact. So there's a credible argument to be made that from the mouth of babes come the truth and the greatest innovations. But thank you for that thoughtfulness.
So Professor, you have packed this episode with punchlines, taglines, takeaways, provocative statements, and real actionable things for people who truly listen in and get the message. But when you have fun having a discussion and you get all of that, 45 minutes just flies by. And so I'm going to jump into the last question for today, which is, I think it'll be very unfair to not ask this question. So let's close out by asking you, it is November 2020. What is your forecast for retail go forward, given all the unusual outcomes from the pandemic, like a very large pantry stocking, which is not going to last forever, the acceleration of the store closure business model? Does foot traffic ever go back to its pre-pandemic January 2020 levels? I mean, when I think back, my mind just gets boggled on. I was taking the subway, going to my then alma mater employer, Revlon, 45 minutes each way, rubbing shoulders with strangers that I didn't even know and probably catching each other's sweat droplets. Little TMI over there, but that was the reality. I can't fathom doing that again. What is your prediction for retail?
Yeah, I think this 2020 holiday shopping is going to be surprisingly good. And I say that because there's a lot of pent-up demand for a lot of items and people will have to really spend those. Okay, that's one. However, the point to be thinking about is not really foot traffic or you know, physical stores or malls are becoming so vibrant again, but that's a lot dependent on how COVID-19 plays out, how we get the vaccine, how people trust themselves to go back into the environment again. But what we have seen is there's a lot of new normal and people are not going back. People who have moved to omnichannel and e-commerce are not going back, the consumers. So they are going to continue to love the convenience. Convenience is king. All right, today, at least the pandemic is borne out. So rather than worrying about, oh, are people going to come to my stores again? Is holiday shopping going to be the same as before? Or, online or offline sales are going to be better? Let's start thinking in terms of not foot traffic, but in terms of capturing share of wallet now. So if all the CPG companies, retailers, everybody thinks about, I'm going to be more customer-centric, consumer-centric, and start working about what is most convenient for them, right? If it means that they don't have to come to really physical stores and shop, but I can still get their basket, it's very important to focus on how to get that basket to them, not really how to make them come to my place, which is actually going to be a new normal. You're not going to get the same kind of traffic again when people are used to the convenience. Of course, if COVID is completely eliminated and so on, people might rethink, would it be nice to go out and browse a lot, right? It wouldn't be nice to go and rub shoulders, like as Sri said, but not with sweat, but with other people. But regardless of that happening, we are going to address the new normal consumer. And even though this holiday shopping, thanks to Amazon and the acceleration in shopping, all of these will help holiday shopping. But beyond that, we have to be looking at a new normal where we measure the holiday season by share of wallet, not necessarily by foot traffic.
Professor, what a power-packed episode you have provided for our listeners today. I cannot thank you enough for doing that. As we start wrapping up this episode on the CPG guys, would you mind sharing for our audience, if anyone wanted to connect with you, what's the best format for them to do that?
You can reach me through a multitude of social media platforms. I'm very common at LinkedIn and Twitter. So my Twitter handle is @Venky Shankar, and my LinkedIn profile can be got by Googling me. If you Google me, in fact, you can get access to my email. You can get access to all the social media platforms and handles I have. So type Venky Shankar or Venkatesh Shankar. Both of them will reach me and give you all kinds of information. And it'll also tie me with my Center for Retailing Studies site, where there's a ton of insights and information available there too.
Awesome, Professor Peter. As always, I cannot thank you enough for being my partner in this journey of the CPG guys. Thank you for being
Sri,
here.
we'll put links to the professor's LinkedIn profile and his retail studies site in the liner notes of the podcast. So anyone who's downloaded this podcast, just open up the liner notes and there'll be hot links there. Sri, wow, we talked scanner panel today. He had me at scanner panel. I want to get my wand out and start waving it at UPCs everywhere I get. Professor, thank you so much. This was such a treat for me. And I know for Sri as well. You have piqued a lot of curiosity, and you and I are going to be following up on using natural language processing to analyze consumer feedback. We got a lot to talk about.
Thank you very much. Thank you personally for this invitation. I really loved my discussion with you guys. You guys are on the ball, and wish you all the very best moving forward.
Sri, I hear us being on the curriculum.
Yes, I can't wait, actually.
For his academic classes.
I can't wait for the professor to ask us that question. But as we wrap up this episode, Professor, I wanted to thank you personally for not just coming on the show, but being a friend. And we hope you'll come back early next year to talk about how 2020 went in a general assessment. Hopefully the country will be in a better place by then from a healthcare perspective, and you'll be able to give us an assessment of what's next. For all our listeners, find our content on cpgguys.com. We love that you've chosen to give us ratings and reviews on the Apple Podcast platform, tinyurl.com/Apple CPG Podcast. And for laugh and giggles, check out our Instagram platform, where we have also launched a new IGTV series, 1Q, 1A. Peter and I take on one question probing the industry, and we try to give an answer in less than 5 minutes. And you'll catch about 20 episodes of this through the end of the year.
Sound bites.
Absolutely. And the Instagram handle is CPG Guys, just like cpgguys.com. Thank you, everybody, and catch you on another episode pretty soon.